The First Law series is a dark fantasy series by British author Joe Abercrombie. It's one of my favourite, if not my favourite series that I have read. I firmly believe this series has the potential to be a great TV show as popular as the first few seasons of Game of Thrones or The Witcher. As far as I'm aware, there is nothing currently in development in the way of an adaptation of The First Law, and I am not a TV show Nevertheless, I thought it might be fun to pitch a pilot for a hypothetical First Law TV show. So if I was the showrunner for that, then this is sort of the basic premise that I would pin the pilot on. With a pilot perhaps more than any other episode, I think the two most important scenes are the opening scene and the closing scene. So I'm gonna do those first and then I'll talk about the stuff that comes in between that. So we'll go opening scene, closing scene, and in between. Fun fact, in between is also a song by this band, Beartooth, which sounds like the name of one of the Northmen in this series. If you want to get to the king, you'll have to pass the might of Beartooth. So if you imagine that the first season will cover the events of the first book, The Blade itself, I'd say that's probably 6 to 8 episodes. Probably not enough content in there for a whole 10 episodes like Game of Thrones did. As anyone who's read The Blade itself can probably attest, the plot in the first book is not exactly breakneck. Even if some characters are liable to breaknecks, it's much more focused on characters than overall story. So 6 to 8 seems a more likely episode count for that book. You have to be realistic about these things. Might be more episodes in later seasons when we go into later books. By the way, this video is going to contain light spoilers for the First Law and The Blade itself specifically. I'm not going to talk about any major spoilers or plot twists that come up later on, but I am going to be talking fairly freely about the first 200 pages or so of The Blade itself. So if you want to read this series completely fresh, maybe give this video a go, but if you're curious to have the series pitched to you, come on and enjoy the video. Here we go. The Blade itself incites to deeds of violence. So the question is, how much of The Blade itself goes into the first episode? From where do we start? And where do we end? The book opens with Logan's crew being attacked by creatures known as the Shanker. Logan gets split up from his crew, falls off a cliff, and believes himself to be the only survivor. For me, in a show, I would go a little bit further back. Because it takes quite a while for the plot to warm up in The Blade itself, I would have a little hook right at the start, and I think the best way to do it is have a sort of opening narration bit. Not exactly a monologue, but almost as though we're overhearing a conversation between Bayaz and Malachus. We could have them discussing the titular First Law and the Second Law, and that's the opening narration that we get, and that can be played over scenes of sort of arcane-looking books and scrolls and the Great Northern Library, and then, you know, shots of the Northern Forest, maybe get some shots of Adua and the Union in there, maybe even have a brief glimpse of the Agrion and see Jezzel fencing in the background, just while Bayaz and Malachus discuss the First and Second Law of Euz.
Tell me, Malachus, what is the First Law? The First Law. It is forbidden to touch the other side direct. Forbidden to communicate with the world below, to summon demons. It is forbidden to open the gates of hell. Good. Now tell me, what is the Second Law? The Second Law. It is forbidden to eat the flesh of men.
The reason I want that to be narration over like panning shots is I don't think that the audience should see Bayaz until Logan meets Bayaz. I think that's got to be a full-on introduction to that character. But if we hear his voice beforehand, I think that's okay. Also, if we know that the First Law and Second Law exist, the First Law being don't touch the other side direct, don't summon demons and that not, we the audience think, oh, that's a possibility. That's a law that can be broken. And same goes for the Second Law. It is forbidden to eat the flesh of men. That tells us from the get-go that that's a thing that happens in the story, and it sets up the Eaters. Just a little hint. Doesn't tell us exactly what the Eaters are, but tells us eating flesh is a bad thing to do in this world, and it is relevant. So, you know, that could be Bayaz quizzing Malachus on the First and Second Law, and then we can have Bayaz tell Malachus that he's got to go and find a Northman and bring him to the Great Northern Library, and that sets up Logan coming to meet Bayaz. So that's just a little introduction, just like a minute or two. And then we catch up with Logan and his crew. I think it might be nice to have a bit of interaction with Logan and his crew while they're still together before the Shanker attack them. Maybe a bit of back and forth, get some of the personalities established, the Dogman and Black Dow and that lot. Then of course the Shanker will attack them and we'll open with a big action scene. We will establish the threat of the Shanker as well as some of the characters of the Northmen, and then Logan will get separated and the pilot will continue from there. That's how I envision the sort of opening. You establish that there's violence, you establish there are some supernatural threats, you establish the Shanker as a thing, an entity that are coming. They're coming down from the north into the more populated lands, and they are a danger to everyone. You establish that you've got Beaz and Malachus, you've got this wise old wizard-type figure. With that as the opening, we can also establish that Beaz has some kind of plan, and it does involve Logan. Obviously, we don't get to know what the plan is. That's one of the big mysteries that is set up through the series. What is Beaz planning? Why does he need Logan? Where's it all heading? But we do get to know that Beaz needs Logan for some unspecified reason. And I think that'd just be a neat way to start the show. Because your opening scene, that's you making your first impression to anyone who's turning on. That's the thing that you've got to make sure keeps people engaged to watch a whole episode. And now the closing scene has to be the thing that hooks people back in for the subsequent episodes and the whole season eventually. So I had a while to think about what would make the best closing scene for a first episode. As I've mentioned, it's not the most heavy in terms of plot, this book, but there are a few moments I think do stand out as potential episode closing moments. One of the moments I thought could make a good closing scene was when Glockter is doing his Inquisition stuff and he stumbles on the trail of dead bodies of the assassinated Mercers. That opens up a whole can of worms in terms of the intrigue that is going on in Adua and the conspiracies that Glockter has to uncover. A trail of dead bodies is a pretty good way to end an episode. Leaves you with the questions: who did this? Why? What are people trying to hide by killing all these people? And will Glockter be able to uncover the truth of it all? Is Glockter straying into dangerous waters now? Yes, he is. How will he cope with that? So that was one of the candidates I had for closing episode. But overall, the more I've sat and thought about this for quite a bit, and I can't think of anything that I would like to close the episode more than the Tea and Vengeance chapter. Beaz, Logan, and Malachus are intercepted by King Bethod's men, and we get the first full, proper demonstration of how powerful Beaz is when they fight them off. If the first episode takes us up to that point, then we get all of the intrigue in the north, Bethod declaring himself king, Logan being his champion turned enemy. We can establish all that. We can establish the Dogmen and the rest of Logan's crew fighting off the Shankar in the wilds, and we can have time to establish some of the conspiracy and intrigue that is going on in the capital. Oh, also Jezel's fencing. We can we can do a bit of Jezel stuff as well. I also considered for an episode closer shortly after Logan and Beaz meet for the first time, and then Prince Calder shows up and Beaz basically force chokes him, which is still a demonstration of Beaz's power, if on a smaller scale. That was not necessarily a joke about Calder being a smaller version of his brother Scale, but it does work that way, doesn't it? It worked out nicely. But I think ending on the bigger demonstration of Beaz's power is the more impactful moment. Up until then, we've only seen Beaz use his power in small pieces on singular people. Force choked Calder and he silenced Corrib. Corrib? Cowrib? Can't be Cowrib, can it? That's not a character, that's a meat. But when they're intercepted by Blacktoe, that is when Beaz goes full wizard and he blows up a bunch of trees and soldiers. There you can see Beaz is a powerful man. It establishes that magic can be this powerful. It gives us a greater understanding of Beaz's magic and how using it does physically exhaust him. Also, if we go up to that point, it gives us a nice lot of time to establish Logan and Malachus and Beaz and get invested in them and set up all the various threats that are facing the world. The Shankar coming from the north, the Gurkish Emperor in the south, the conspiracy in the heart of the capital, Bethod declaring himself king of the north, Jezel possibly losing a fencing contest. Yeah, compared to the others, his problems are not big, are they? But the point is, that is a big moment in the book. I think it would make a great closing scene for a pilot TV episode, and it's a big visual action scene, plus it's given us a lot of time to establish certain characters. I still do think that the scene where Glockter and his practicals discover the trail of dead bodies should come near the end, maybe as like a semi-closing scene. If we ended with Glockter and his crew discovering the bodies, there'd still be a load of Union intrigue to delve into. But if you focus more on the north side of things for the opening episode, we can do delve a little deeper into the Union intrigue and the conspiracy and whatnot in the second episode, with the Guild of Mercers falling and then Fenris the Feared showing up to declare war on the Union. That can be some good second episode stuff. So just to sum that up, open with some opening narration with Beaz and Malachus and having Logan's crew get attacked by the Shankar, and close with Logan, Beaz and Malachus being stopped by Bethod's men and then, I think it's fair to say, obliterating them. Also, it's quite nice if we open with Logan, Beaz and Malachus and then also close the episode with Logan, Bears, and Malicus. It's a nice bookend. Like the way I've got my bookends here, holding up the series. So that's the opening and the closing scene. Now I want to talk about the in-between. From that chapter to the Tea and Vengeance chapter, that's quite a big segment of the book. So, as I just mentioned there a moment ago, save some of the stuff and maybe bump it a bit later into the second episode. Also, I would bring Pharaoh's introduction earlier so that we meet her in the first episode. Because she's a great character, she's very important to the plot, and it would be remiss to leave her and Yulwei out of the pilot episode of the show. Also, if we have Pharaoh and Yulwei's meeting, then we can establish further what the Eaters are and the threat that they pose to everyone. A meeting in that scene could probably take place after Logan meets Beaz, and then somewhere in between that and the ending, because once we've met Beaz, we've established the Order of the Magi. So then when Yulwei shows up, we get an idea of what's going on. So roughly speaking, the plot threads that we follow in the first episode: Pharaoh meeting Yulwei, Logan meeting Beaz and learning that he's got some kind of scheme, the Dogman and the rest of Logan's crew fighting off the Shanker, and then in the Union we've got Jezel training for his fencing contest and then falling in love with Ardi, and we've got Glokta finding the conspiracy in the heart of the Union. Speaking of Glokta, he is the character that poses the biggest challenge for adaptation because so much of his character comes from his internal thoughts and his internal monologue. Those things are also part of what makes him, I don't know if sympathetic is the right word, he is still a torturer after all, but certainly more likeable. The best workaround I can think of to get over that, short of having a peep show style internal monologue that we can hear when the characters can't, is make either Severard or his servant Barnum, or possibly both of them, take on a bit more of a confidant role, so he has someone there that he can make his sarcastic comments to, turn some of his internal thoughts in the book into dialogue for the show, and then we the audience get to hear them as well. If anyone else has a better workaround for that, let me know in the comments, because I'm genuinely curious as to how people would choose to adapt Glokta. And obviously with him, we'll follow him, Severard and Frost as they uncover the mercers who've been dodging taxes and start taking people prisoner, and then eventually stumble on the trail of dead bodies of the mercers that they had planned to interrogate, all the while Glokta is being harassed by orders from Archlector Sult. So that was my pilot pitch for The First Law, a hypothetical TV show that does not yet exist, but I really think should. Let me know what you think of it down in the comments. Did I try to fit too much in the pilot? Did I put not enough in the pilot? Let me know if you agree with the choices I made, or if you disagree with some of the things that I've said. What changes would you have made? What would you do if you were adapting The First Law? Who would you cast in The First Law if you were making a TV show of it? And how would you adapt Glokta's character onto screen? All of that, let me know in the comments below. If you haven't read The Blade itself or any of the First Law books, I hope that watching this video has inspired you to do so, because it is a very good series. If you like dark fantasy, then you're gonna have a good time with it. It's brilliant. There it is. Get into it. If you like this video, like it. If you want to see more from me, you can subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and as always, I will see you in my next one.